Hey guys, ECRG back with another video. Today we're going to go in depth, down deep into an annotated report. Stay tuned. Hey guys, ECRG here, back with another video. Today we're going to be talking about what is an annotated report, what exactly is on an annotated report. Because I know a lot of you guys are curious. Now, if you haven't watched my last video about what is an annotated report, I would go and watch that because that really sets the foundation for today's video about, what exactly the questions that are on an annotated report. So just a quick summary, annotated report is basically a template for all the things that should be looked at on a monitoring visit. Now, like I said before, go and look at the previous video titled What is an Annotated Report, and to learn a bit more about exactly what that template entails. But now we're going to go deep. So the first thing that's typically on an annotated report that they want to talk about, or that the study team wants you to talk about on a monitoring visit, is subject recruitment. Subject recruitment is huge. Subject recruitment is one of the most important things that allows site to be selected for a study. So obviously, from the CRO and the sponsor's perspective, we want to know, how are you doing with recruitment? So on the annotated report, it's just going to be a template. But what I typically do is I look at the SIV report or the PI questionnaire or feasibility survey and look at how many patients the site said they would be able to enroll. And I write that down on my annotated report. So if a site says they're going to enroll 10 patients, I write that down there so I know that when I'm talking to the study coordinator, either on the phone or on site, I know, hey, they said they're going to enroll this many patients. So that's typically how I start. And I typically open up with a very open question about that. How's recruitment going? And I let them talk. Typically, you don't want to put words in the site's mouth when you're talking about recruitment. You want to let them, kind of tell it from their perspective. And then you can ask follow-up questions from there. So, on the annotated report, there's just going to be a general question that will say something like, is the site on target to meet the enrollment plan for this study? If no, then refer to action items. So that's that. I typically add a lot of follow-up questions to my personal annotated report, but on the annotated report itself, it's just going to have that very general question. Next on the annotated report is going to be a section about informed consent. And now this is just one version of an annotated report. I'm sure other ones may be structured differently depending on where you work, but this is just one version that are out there out of probably many, but they're all going to be, structured in a particular way that makes sense for that CRO or for that sponsor. So, one of the sections that's also on there is informed consents. So it will be like, is information regarding informed consent being collected for this report. And informed consent is very important to the study because that's where the study coordinator or the PI is going to educate each patient about what is going on in the study. And usually for informed consent, if it's a pediatric study, there's going to be assent forms, which shows that, they sign off on it. But there's also going to be consent forms, which show that, the parent signs off on it too. So you're going to need both. But if someone's over the age of 18, then all they need is the consent. So, typically you have to collect the information that's on the informed consent form, like version date, a signature date, things like that. So next section is going to be dealing with informed consent. Then the section after that, typically there's going to be a section about queries and action items. So typically that, they're going to ask the generic question is the site current with data entry and query resolution? And this is the section where, they talk about the queries, you talk about the queries and, any missing data points. And, we'll do a further in-depth video on, some of the follow-up questions, but really I just wanted this video to be about the generic annotated report template so you guys have an idea of what that's like. And then there might be another question that says, were the previous action items and data queries resolved. On the annotated report, it's really just a guideline and a template. So typically when you're in the system, in the CTMS system, there's going to be, check boxes for the annotated report saying yes or no. So if you notice that previous question, were previously opened action items and queries resolved, that's a yes or no question. So if they were resolved, you check yes. If they were not resolved, you check no. And all of these tend to be yes or no questions. And then, the next section is going to be, are there any protocol deviations to report? That's a yes or no question. If yes, then you're going to want to describe them a little bit further in the next box, but that open question is just a yes or no question. Okay, then another box is going to be about any serious adverse events. So did the staff report, or did the site report any serious adverse events? That's a yes or no question. And then they typically ask about other serious adverse events. So they say, have there been any serious adverse events previously? And that's a yes or no question also. So you're beginning to see a pattern here about the yes or no question on the annotated report. And then they ask other questions. Next is going to be a whole section about the investigational product. So they're going to ask, has the randomization process been followed according to the protocol? That's a yes or no question. Has the blind been maintained, if there is a blind, that is? So they're going to ask about that. That's a yes or no question. Is there enough IP without expiring? Is there enough unexpired IP on site? That's a yes or no question. And like I said, if there's a follow-up to that, if the site will usually say, yeah, but it's expiring next week, so then you've got to tell them to order new IP. Like I said, the blind maintain question is really a yes or no. There's not really going to be any follow-up there. Then you may ask, next question is going to be about clinical supplies in the facilities, if there are any changes there. So they might ask, are there enough clinical and lab supplies that are not expired also? So that's a yes or no question. Then you might ask, how are the equipment at the facility? Are they being properly maintained and calibrated? And that's a yes or no question also. But a follow-up question to that could be, when was the equipment last calibrated, and what is the calibration schedule like? Now, this is a question that you would typically ask in the earlier stages, typically after you've done like a bunch of monitoring visits or monitoring calls. You don't need to ask that question anymore because they already told you what the schedule is like. Some of them, they do it every 6 months. Some sites do it every month. It just depends on the site. And then another question you might ask are the biological samples being adequately collected for the study? Labeled, stored, packaged, all that stuff. And that's a yes or no question also. But this is going to be different per annotated report. Not everything, may be shipped on a weekly basis or something like that. Some of the samples may be held for months at a time. Some of the samples may be shipped every day. It just depends. So the annotated report is going to be different per protocol. I cannot stress that enough. This is going to be different for every study that you're on. So, some of the questions are going to be generic, and they may be, per study, per protocol, but there are going to be different ones. But here's one that's going to be, the same for every study. They ask about the site qualifications. Have the site staff remained the same since the last visit? They want to make sure of that, because you want to make sure if there's a new study coordinator coming on, that you have their medical license, their financial disclosure form, the updated 1572, new GCP training, new protocol training. That's why you want to make sure that you ask these questions. But a lot of times, if you're doing these monthly or every other month, there's no new site staff changes typically. But when there are, you want to make sure you ask that question so you can get all the stuff into the TMF. And then you also ask, has all site staff been adequately trained up until this point? So those are just the simple generic questions. And that's going to be on every study, pretty much. That's unanimous. Then you may ask about the TMF. Now it's the monitor's job to review the TMF and collect any outstanding documents. Sometimes they may have an in-house CRA to help them do this. Sometimes they may have another monitor that's going to help them do this. Sometimes it's just themselves. It just depends. So, they may ask about the TMF on the annotated report, but that's really a question for you to answer because the site is not responsible for uploading documents into the TMF. The site is responsible for providing documents to the CRA to upload into the TMF, but they are not responsible for uploading into the TMF directly. So the question may be, are all essential documents present in the TMF, which could be on the annotated report? And, that's not something you would ask the site. That's something you'd ask yourself. So, but that's on there. And then typically at the end, that's the end of of an annotated report. Like I said, there are going to be some follow-up questions that you might have in there as you get more experience. But, the last question you would ask is, when can we schedule the next visit? And you go ahead and get a date tentatively on the calendar. Now, if you're doing visits every month, it's going to be a lot easier to stick to that visit. But if you're doing visits every other month, or even longer than that, every 3 months, things come up for the site. They may have a patient coming in and have to cancel that visit. So you're going to have to make sure that you reach out to them a week in advance or a few days in advance to make sure that date and time still works. Same thing if you're doing remote monitoring also. So, that's just a basic annotated report. Like I said, each study protocol is going to be a little bit different, and they may have more information on there depending on the study, and they may have less information on there depending on the study. Each CRO is going to have some kind of template, and then it's going to be the study team leads, the project manager, the lead CRA or clinical trial lead, and then in correspondence with the sponsor to come up with the annotated report for that particular study. So that's an important distinction to make, that these change based on the study. And I know I've said that a bunch, but it's just very important to understand that. So, all right, guys, if you have any questions, comment down below. Email us eliteclinicalgroup@gmail.com. Interested in the resume review program, email us there also. Happy to have you. And take care, guys.